One of the stranger phenomenons we're going to see as we approach the end of the Famicom's life is that a lot of companies are going to go back and revisit something from the height of the Famicom boom. Something that did well for them at the time, but they didn't turn into a series. In the case of Wai Wai World, the first game came out in January of 1988. Now I'll admit that in the distant future of 2023, 3 years between games doesn't seem that unreasonable, but this is the Famicom era where 6-month development cycles were pretty reasonable. The original Wai Wai World was a proto-Metroidvania with large stages that you could freely roam around, and your goals were to free a bunch of Konami characters, as well as collect all of their power-ups. That Wai Wai World contained characters such as King Kong and Mikey from the Goonies, so it had a bit of a limited shelf life. Wai Wai World 2, on the other hand, is all Konami characters all the time. When you start the game, you're given your choice of 4 different sets of characters that you can use. Those sets are made up of 5 different characters from other Konami games, and each of them has their own level in Wai Wai World 2. You always start out controlling Rickle, a robot made by Dr. Cinnamon, who also created Twinbee. The A button jumps and the B button attacks, and Rickle fires small energy bursts from his hands and can perform a double jump. An important thing about Rickle is that he's the one who has a life bar, the hearts you see at the bottom of the screen. When Rickle runs out of hearts, that's when you lose a life. As you're playing the stage, you can collect a power-up marked with a C, and that starts the character roulette at the bottom of the screen. You have 3 icons there, one for every character in the set that you picked, and when you hit up into A, you'll transform into the highlighted character. One thing to be aware of about the characters is that using a character on their own stage usually conveys some kind of benefit. There can be additional drops from enemies, special blocks that you could break, or areas only accessible by that character. Finally, it's time to get into who's in this crossover game. Goemon is from the Ganbare Goemon games. The first Super Famicom Ganbare Goemon game won't be released until July, so this was the first time that players could use Goemon in a platformer. Well, unless you count Mr. Goemon, which you shouldn't, except for the fact that the stages here seem to be based on Mr. Goemon. I'm not going to bother pointing out every reference to an old Konami game in Wai Wai World 2, so keep an eye out and see how many you can spot. Back to Goemon as a character. He throws his pipe, which boomerangs back, and the pipe stays level with him so you can maneuver it around as it flies. The baby is Upa from Biomiracle Bokute Upa. That's a Famicom Disk System game that I haven't talked about on Famidaily, but we are going to see the game before I'm done with this project. Upa attacks enemies with a rattle that has a very short range, but it turns them into clouds that he can ride on. Also, the clouds can contain the items that the enemies dropped, so if you jump up through them or wait for them to fade out at the top of the screen, you can get the item. Upa's also very small, which lets him crawl into places that other characters can't reach. The other melee character is Fuma from Getsu Fumaden. That's the horror-themed samurai game that didn't get a sequel until 2022. Fuma's sword is the strongest attack in the game, and that's really the only thing he has going for him. The same might be said of Simon Belmont from Akuma Joe Dracula, another Famicom Disk System game that I haven't talked about on Famidaily yet, but I will before I reach the end. His whip has a little bit longer reach, but it's not as strong. Finally, there's Bill from the Contra series, and naturally, he has a gun. You can point up and fire to shoot upward, which makes him the only character in the game with a vertical attack. No firing at a diagonal, though. The characters that Rickle transforms into don't have health bars. Instead, they have timers that are constantly ticking down, and if they get hit by an enemy, they lose 5 ticks off that timer. They can recover some of that timer by collecting the med kits you'll find laying around. Those are also used to restore some of Rickle's health. And it's even possible for them to refresh their own timer by collecting a transformation icon and then using it to turn into themselves. Collecting the M icon will make you invulnerable for about 15 seconds. Enemies can also drop an H for Hyper Bomb. To use these, you have to hold down the B button until your character flashes, and then when you let go, everything on the screen will die. The other thing that enemies drop are these little angel symbols, and when you collect enough of those, you get an extra life. The last one that you need will be flashing. All of the platforming stages scroll automatically, so you're locked into a constant pace here, but it is a fairly slow pace. The enemies seem to be somewhat randomized. There will be certain places where there will always be an enemy, but for a lot of the weaker ones, they just pop out from a side whenever. Bosses, of course, can be found at the end of most stages. For stages 3, 6, and 8, you're given a choice of what you want to do. On stage 3, you've got the choice of 2 different Twin Bee stages. And on stage 8, you have your choice of 2 different Gradius stages. Both of those shoot-'em-ups work exactly like their regular counterparts. In Twin Bee, you shoot clouds to make bells appear, and then you can shoot those bells to make them rotate through colors and be power-ups for Twin Bee when he collects them. On Gradius, you have to collect capsules, and those rotate through a power-up bar at the bottom, and you press B to activate that power-up when it's highlighted one that you want. Both Gradius stages eventually merge back into one, where you fight a really big core. For your 6th stage, you're given your choice between puzzle or driving. For driving, you've just got this vertical track where you can ram cars off the road and collect power-ups that will let you attack what's in front of you. The puzzle's a little bit more confusing. You have a scrambled picture that you rebuild by selecting a tile with A and then swapping it with another tile. But there's a train at the bottom that's going toward that angel, and so sometimes you'll have to go off the bottom of the puzzle by going where the arrow is, and then hitting A on her to swap her to the other side of the track. Complete 2 of these puzzles and you go on to the next stage. There's also a bonus stage after the Twin Bee level, where it puts Twin Bee into a Space Harrier style game where you're just collecting bells. Now if all of that wasn't enough for you, Wai Wai World 2 also includes a 2-player mode. 2 players can simultaneously attempt to rescue the kidnapped princess, who's been abducted along with all of Parsley Castle, which is why this game has the subtitle SOS Parsley Joe, or SOS Parsley Castle. If you get a game over, there is a password system here, and it preserves your character selection. Wai Wai World 2 is a controversial game in Japan. The naysayers don't like how you can't select your characters freely, how the characters themselves aren't well balanced, and that there isn't a whole lot of differentiation between them. My feeling on Wai Wai World 2 is that it's a lot of fun. Even if it wasn't a crossover game that brought together a bunch of characters that I already like, this would be a pretty fun game to play. The style of gameplay changes a lot, even between the platforming levels, and the graphics and music are top-notch here. Wai Wai World 2 feels like a whole bunch of games have been mashed together to make it, and that can be a recipe for disaster, but all of the gameplay styles here are really well made. Wai Wai World 2 is a top-tier game on the Famicom.